Welcome to Privilege and Protest, Chicagoland's wealthy western suburbs in this latest iteration of social upheaval and the newest crossroads of privilege and protest. I'm Dominic, and today, Wednesday, June 17th, 2020, I'm joined by another organizer of a daytime protest in Naperville, Jenny Scara. Jenny, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Awesome. I'm doing all right. Enjoying the nice weather for once, although we are still in the midst of coronavirus for all those watching in the future. So it's a mixed bag. I had dinner last night in our small patio area, which was like, oh, this is nice to
hmm
get to enjoy a meal. But it's weird,
Yeah.
man. I'm a big restaurant goer, so but haven't been able to enjoy that at all. Probably won't until the fall. But anyway. Putting it to you, what is your connection to Naperville exactly? Talking about these protests. What's your connection to Naperville?
Well, I mean, I live in Batavia, so I
Mhm.
don't live in Naperville, but a ton of my friends live in there. I have two teammates, actually three teammates that they live in Lisle, but they went to school in Naperville, high school in Naperville. So when I go to protest there, I usually attend with them, and
Mhm.
that's pretty much my connection. And obviously, like Naperville's a hot spot for restaurants and such.
Yeah.
So now that, like you said, now that coronavirus is infiltrated our lives, I haven't really been able to go to a lot of restaurants there, but in the past I've been there quite a few times. So
Yeah, I'm with you, and it sounds weird because a lot of, a lot of people I'm interviewing are like, yeah, I'm not really from Naperville, but I went to college there for 5 years. Or I have friends there, and it sounds weird because it's like, all right, what's going on? But for context, Naperville really is it's kind of like a center for DuPage County, and it's a
yeah.
big spot for the western suburbs outside of Chicago, and certainly wealthy. Can easily
hmm
give you the numbers on that. So
Yeah.
it Naperville is kind of this kind of they definitely the center of everything. It wants to be the center of everything, and it kind of is. So whatever
hmm
happens in Naperville spills out easily to the rest of the communities, no doubt, especially
Yeah.
Aurora, Downers Grove, and Batavia, of course. And
hmm
Bolingbrook, where I'm living right now, it's same thing as well. A lot of my neighbors
Yeah.
actually also work in Naperville. But yeah, what
hmm
protests have you been involved in? I know there was one a couple of weeks ago on a Thursday, but was that the only one, or were there others?
No, I was keeping track, but I it's probably like
Yeah, yeah.
eight or nine by now. I kind of just
Wow.
lost track. It's so many, but um yeah, my first one was the one in Aurora. No, I lied. It was my first one was the one in Geneva, which I accidentally stumbled upon because I work for DoorDash, so I was doing that and I was
Right.
making a delivery and I saw them marching down State Street and I was like, oh my gosh, like so I literally as safely as I could sped to the place,
Right.
dropped off the food, and came back, parked my car in the Jewel Osco on Randall, and then just joined the march. And it was so like there was only I don't know 50, 75 people there, so it wasn't like huge, but it was just so it was really like it's the first one that I was a part of, so it was like really eye opening to
Yeah.
see how much people cared. Um, and then I went to the one in Aurora where the rioting and the looting started.
Hmm.
And I was there for like the early stages of that, and I was there for like the first couple tear gas canisters that the police threw. But after like the third one they threw, I was like, I gotta get out of here.
Yeah.
Like,
No, wouldn't blame you. I mean, for the Naperville vandalism that took place on Monday, June 1st, I mean, a guy got
mhm.
stabbed, 20-year-old got stabbed. So no blame whatsoever
Yeah,
for wanting to get out of there. It is funny though that
yeah,
you mentioned that you were just kind of doing your gig, and then you just saw protest happen. Like, screw it, I'm gonna just park and join. It's like the 2020 equivalent of like a revolutionary France, where like a villager comes out of the house. I'm like, oh wow, this is happening. All right, join the
yeah.
streets, join the march.
That's pretty much how it was. Yeah, because I had wanted to join a protest, and I knew that there was stuff going on, like obviously in major cities, but I didn't know that it had made its way out to the suburbs. So when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, like
Yeah,
I have to join. Like I thought about it for a second. I was like, well, do I like should I join it? And I was like, if I don't join this right now, I'm gonna regret it. Like I'm definitely gonna regret it. So I
yeah.
parked my car and I just jumped right in, and everybody. I I, I didn't even know anybody there, but they like just took me in like they had known me all their life. It was kind of awesome.
Yeah, wow. I guess there's solidarity for you. You know what? Speaking of that,
Yeah.
I've seen you replicate that with the marches I've seen you be part of. Tell me, as someone who organizes these, and are you part of like a larger organization, or is it just kind of like through social media, impromptu, kind of, come as you go kind of thing?
Well, honestly, like me, Elijah, and Pam, like we didn't organize that protest in Naperville. Like somebody else organized it, and we showed up, and we were chanting on that corner of the Barnes and Noble for like, I
Yeah.
don't know, 20 minutes. And I was kind of like looking around, like, are we just going to stand here and chant in front of this Barnes and Noble? Or are we actually going to like march? So I went up to Pam, who I thought was running it. I was like, hey, are you in charge? She's like, no. I was like, well, who's in charge? She's, I don't know. I was like, okay. So we found that girl with the loudspeaker or the megaphone and asked her if she could make an announcement, like asking like, hey, if you organize this event, can you come to the front of Barnes and Noble? Did that like 5 times, waited like 15 minutes. Nobody came. So me and Pam just kind of looked at each other and we're like, we're probably going to have to do this on our own. So we started it out with the march around the downtown area of Naperville to City Hall. And then while we were marching to City Hall was when I met Elijah. And then he just started talking to me and he was really cool. And then it was his idea to stop there at City Hall and chant for a while and then go to the police station.
Yeah.
So he kind of like, once he came into the mix, like he had like a ton of great ideas. Like, let's go to the police station. It was his idea to take Ogden Avenue and like shut down all the traffic. Cause he was like, we're at this police station and no, like they're not listening to us. So let's make them listen. And at first I was like a little apprehensive. I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't want to get arrested. Like if we shut down the streets or whatever. He's like, no, dude, like it's pointless if nobody listens. I was like, you're right. So it was his idea to take it into the streets instead of on the sidewalk. And it was his idea to go through that big the neighborhood with the big houses. He was like, there's probably a lot of Republicans in here. So let's make them hear us. And I was like, all right.
Yeah, hey,
So,
I mean, I don't know exactly the party affiliation of neighborhoods, but definitely the McMansions that line Naperville, and a lot of DuPage, really. That's I'm really surprised that you guys not only went through down the main Washington Street, the main thoroughfare that runs through downtown Naperville, but also through the neighborhoods as well, to the police department and a lot of the side streets, which. It's funny. I was watching that on NCTV, the local news here in around DuPage, and you were really tiring those news guys out. So they were getting their cardio in. So all kudos to them if you're watching this. But
yeah, I watched their live stream after I got home because they had posted it, and he was running around like he put in some. Him and the camera guy, like they put in some work in there. So kudos to them for that.
Yeah, I've been in their situation too, where it's like, you got to kind of stop and like talk to people and take pictures. So every time you got to catch up to the front of the protest again. So again, kudos to them. But speaking of your kind of your occupation of Chicago and Washington, kind of the main intersection in the Barnes and Noble. There's been a lot of consternation about the disruption of the roads and the streets from Naperville residents. And in fact, last night, today's Wednesday, right? Yeah. So last night on Tuesday, the city of Naperville held its town meeting, city council meeting. And they had a public forum where people could call in through Zoom. It was all Zoom based. Interesting.
Yeah.
And there was a gentleman who was very, very adamant on stating his opinion on how, occupying the intersections is a disruption of services and cars and whatnot. He specifically pointed out ambulances.
And the purpose of my participation in the meeting today concerns the health and safety of all Naperville citizens during illegal street blockages by any type of protest. Let me explain. I am a person with a heart condition. I also have an elderly parent and other family members in Naperville that all go to Edward Hospital as needed, more than once in an ambulance. Recently, as we are all aware of, there have been protests that have totally blocked Washington and Jefferson, as well as Aurora and Ogden at times. What if you, any member of your family or friends, needed emergency care and the ambulance needed to take you to Edward? If the street was being illegally blocked by any protest, the emergency vehicle would need to detour. How much time would that take? 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 2 minutes, more, who knows? The point is that seconds matter and can be the difference between life or death. As a result of a conversation with Police Chief Marshall, I have confirmed that blocking any street in Naperville is in fact against the law. Protesters of any type need to be immediately removed or disbanded if they are blocking any street, particularly Washington, which we all know is our main thoroughfare and potential route to Edward Hospital for many. Now, everyone has a right to protest anything, but it must be done legally. Protesters of any type need to be in legal areas. If not, they need to be removed by whatever means necessary. That is the job of the police. In summary, protesters have rights, and I, along with every other citizen in Naperville, have rights too. We have a right to immediate and clear access to Edward Hospital at all times. I suggest you ask yourselves, what if it was you or your family member in that ambulance? Thank you very much for your time.
Post, but he was making a point about how interrupting the main streets there is technically breaking the law, and that people who break the law should be stopped by the police. So I don't. What are your comments on that exactly about possibly interrupting life-saving services as well as breaking, quote unquote, breaking the law when it comes to protesting?
Well, if I'm being honest, like that's. If I have to quote literally Martin Luther King Jr. and his talk about civil disobedience, and Henry David Thoreau and his talk about civil disobedience, and how if a law is unjust, you have a moral obligation to break that law. And in the case of taking to the streets and protesting, yeah, I mean, it might be inconvenient for you if you're trying to get to work, and I'll touch on the ambulance thing in a minute. But if you're trying to get to work, or you're trying to go grocery shopping, like, sorry about the inconvenience, but like, people are dying, Black people are dying, and I would have to say that their lives, in my opinion, are a little bit more important than you being late to the grocery store or you being late to your doctor's appointment. So sorry, I guess, would be my statement to that. But in the case of the ambulances, they have direct contact with the police station. They have direct contact with the fire station. They have direct contact with the city. So if there's a protest going on Ogden Avenue and they need to, their original route was to go down Ogden Avenue, they would easily be able to be informed by the city that, hey, Ogden Avenue is completely shut down right now. If you're going to save this person, please go this way. And they would change their route. So it's, I mean, if you're more worried about people getting stuck in traffic than you are about Black lives, then like, I don't really know what to tell you, Mm-hmm. It just that stuff kind of just it's really, that's kind of the reason why we're marching, to help people understand that this is an issue that's bigger than themselves, and that the world doesn't just revolve around you going to the grocery store, you going wherever in your car. Like there's bigger things going on than that,
Yeah.
So
A lot to unpack there, but certainly the concept of civil disobedience. You can't be disobedient on a civic level if you don't necessarily break a law. And of course, you got to pick and choose which laws to break, so as to, I guess, gain the sympathy of the masses. Which again, straddle that line very carefully. But I don't know. So far, do you think you're making a difference? Like, do you still feel energized to do this stuff, or where do you find yourself at this current moment here on June 17th? As a few protests have already happened, and there are a few more coming up, and a lot of the national conversation is still focused. How do you feel at this current moment?
I still personally feel energized. I can see that a lot of white people or people that this doesn't really affect could have a lot of burnout. And I mean, in some cases that's understandable. Like if you're protesting every single day for 2 weeks, like you're going to get burnt out, you're going to get tired. You need some days to rest. But as for me, like I feel like a moral obligation to stay energized, almost. Like, not that it's an inconvenience at all, because it's not. Like, I want to be out here doing this stuff, but like I don't know. I've never even really considered like what it would be to not be energized about this. Like I know some people who aren't, and I'm like, I just don't get it. Like, I don't know. That might just be like my political scientist in me. Just
is that what you're? Is that something you want to study? Political science?
Yeah, I'm a political science. I'm a political science major and a philosophy major at Illinois State. So
there you go.
That's like. Yeah, so I like love this stuff, and I love being involved in this stuff. But yeah, I think that just based off social media, there's been some burnout by what Martin Luther King would probably say, the white moderate, where like they don't really care. They care about it when it's trending, and they care about it when everybody's talking about it. Mm-hmm. But when nobody's talking about it, they just lose interest. And that's one of the most.
Yeah, the white moderate. I believe that's from Letter from Birmingham
Jail. Letter from a Birmingham jail. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the all-time most important reads, which I kind of gloss over. Actually, I've been thinking. I was thinking about this, and like growing up, and I was raised in Catholic school, like from grade school to high school, so that's its own thing. But and I don't know about you, but what was your education with Martin Luther King Jr.? I phrased that weird. Like, what did you learn about him growing up from the school system or from media in general? What was like your overall impression? Like, what was the timeline there?
Well, I mean, I grew up in Batavia,
right.
And the suburbs full of white people, so we don't really get much of an education on Black history at all. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you. I will tell you the extent of our education of Black history. It was slavery was bad, but then Abraham Lincoln came and he stopped it because he loved Black people. And then Martin Luther King came in and he was really nice, but Malcolm X was really mean. So everybody liked Martin Luther King and not Malcolm X. And then Martin Luther King ended racism. The end. Like, that's like literally all it was. Yeah. And barely anything about Malcolm X either. But like, to the extent of Martin Luther King, like all we learned about him was that he existed, that he was a leader of the civil rights movement, which was in the 60s. We learned about them on the Montgomery bus boycott. We learned about, obviously, the I Had a Dream speech.
Which is like one of his nicest speeches. Right.
Yeah.
Comparing it to others, which are much more forward.
Mm-hmm. We learned that basically what we were told was that Martin Luther King was a very civil person, and he did not like violence, and he did not like breaking the law. But as I grew older, and as I actually studied Martin Luther King in college, and especially in philosophy, where we like dove into a Letter from Birmingham Jail, I learned that he was actually like quite the opposite, in that he advocated for civil disobedience, which was a direct form of breaking the law, based on your moral compass, obviously. But yeah, we didn't learn a lot about Martin Luther King. And it's kind of like looking back, it makes me sad, you know, like, I don't know. And I don't know.
Yeah, I can certainly say right up with that. I completely agree because if you listen to a lot of his speeches, and a lot of them I do need to educate myself on, re-educate myself on, and really read them and listen to them again. But later on, I didn't even know he was being like surveyed by the FBI, like
Oh yeah.
completely illegal. Like I did not learn about Coinelpro or Fred Hampton or like what the Black
Hmm.
Panthers even were actually until like
Yeah, I
way
didn't I
later.
didn't learn any of that either.
It's
Yeah.
crazy, but
Yeah.
we do a deep dive into history. I know you do this just on the daily, but in terms of
Hmm.
bringing it back to Naperville, what kind of what are the goals? I should say, what are the goals of these Naperville protests in particular? Is it something like some change you want to enact locally, like in the DuPage County area, western suburbs, or is this more so just to show solidarity with the larger BLM movement?
Well, I mean, obviously, I would say every single protest happening around the country is in solidarity with the larger Black Lives Matter movement. But for Naperville and white suburbs, specifically outside of Chicago, I would say the main goal of these protests is just to raise awareness because you don't you don't see racism happening in these communities as a white person in a white person's perspective because you're just not paying attention. And like at Batavia, tw- I, we had black people at our school, but not a ton, like not at all a ton, a
Mm-hmm.
handful. And I just went about my days like I did not think that any sort of racism happened at Batavia. I never heard of anything happening, but now that this Black Lives Matter movement is happening, I see all these black kids from my school, some people that were my friends, like posting about their experiences on Facebook and talking about how they had to deal with these microaggressions every single day. They had racist comments made at them, and they would go to administration about it, but administration wouldn't do anything, and they would just kind of brush it off. And I had no idea. Like I just had no idea. And I think that's really the problem in these white suburbs is that a lot of us, because our suburbs are mainly white, we don't see it happening. We're kind of blind to it. So these protests are just a great way to raise awareness for that. Plus, we're advocating for just more help in our communities of color in the suburbs because I mean these suburbs are mainly white. So our I feel like the people of color that live in our communities kind of just get shoved off to the side and they don't really get paid attention to. So just basically making our voices heard and telling these city governments that hey, like we need to uplift these communities. We need to invest in their housing. We need to invest in their education. We need to invest in their food sources, their water source, like all this stuff, you know, because even though they live in the same town as us, the experience that they have is completely different
It can be a whole other
because just
world.
because of yeah, it really is. Like um in my town, we so my town is mainly white, but we have one area of town by Louise White Elementary School, which is where I went to elementary school,
Hmm.
which is the neighborhoods around there are mainly people of color. So I don't know when this happened, but sometime before I started going to school at Louise White, they decided that they were going to take pockets of neighborhoods from around the city where more white kids lived and diversify that school because it was literally like it was straight up segregation. Like that's
Wow.
where they had all like the people of color living in one specific area going to one specific school. So I live on the complete opposite side of that. Like I still live on the east side, but
Hmm.
Louise White is on the north side and I'm on the south side. So I'm way closer to JB Nelson to Hoover Wood, but my neighborhood was chosen to go to school at Louise White so they could diversify the school a little bit. And I think that those kind of changes, like, they make all the difference, you know? They really do.
Yeah, that goes into like deep city planning stuff, and for now, probably more qualified people might be able to go in detail about that stuff. But
Mhm.
you feel it on such a level. I know personally, growing up in Downers Grove for the first 25 years of life, and I'm 26 now. In Downers Grove, we lived by, and we're Filipino for reference. My parents would always warn me, quietly warn me, not like outright, but they would, just have a comment about, hey, just try to avoid these certain apartments. Right? There would always be like a
Mhm.
2-second comment. And lo and behold, whenever we would drive by, I'd see like, oh, hey, a lot of people of color in these apartments. I wonder why.
Mhm.
Which is funny because like I'm a
Yeah.
person of color. Of course, there's a certain dichotomy about the specific history of Asian Americans, and I think Asian Americans are like the wealthiest demographic. But that's for a whole other reason. Again, we could do deep dives on this stuff. But for reference, in Naperville, according to the 2010 census, so that might change soon, but we'll see. 76.5% of the population of Naperville is white, 15% Asian, 5.3% Hispanic or Latino, and 4.7% Black. So it's definitely a minority for the Black population, Latino population, but
Yeah.
it's just so interesting to see that, especially now in this time of protest, and of course, stretching back for a long time, but particularly in this current moment, to see all these minorities, all these people of color come out of the woodwork to say like, hey, we're here, by the way, just so you know.
Yeah, like, hey, we exist.
Yeah.
We live here. Hey.
And it's just something that can be so blocked by the white population, or even just wealth. You could easily just say wealth as well, which is a whole other level. But I guess bringing it back. Can you cite any specific examples of mismanagement by? Well, I guess Batavia would be your neck of the woods. Then, and you laid a good one out there. But any others in terms of like Batavia police or Batavia city government, in terms of mismanagement in regards to race?
I personally haven't seen any interactions with the police that have been mismanaged with specifically Black people, but people of color. And I would assume that's because I'm white and I don't ever get stopped by police, and I don't really see, there's not a ton of Black people in Batavia, so I don't really see that happening a lot. But I mean, I'm sure that it does happen. I'm not going to say it doesn't, because it probably does, as good as I think our police department is. But besides that, I would say like the main thing that I've noticed is just the pockets of places in which Black people and people of color live. Because I could literally I could take you to the areas and where all the Black people live. There's like three different areas where they all live, and I could literally show you, and I could show you the neighborhoods where they don't live and where it's all white people. And I think that.
And has it been like that for your whole life? Has there been any kind of mobility? And I know you mentioned earlier the school example of just kind of trying to push along the diversity, but in terms of just even neighborhoods, have you seen that mobility?
I mean, not particularly, no. And I'm not gonna like shame Batavia for it, because I don't really know what they could do to fix it besides.
Yeah, I mean, we're not advocating for like a full on, built city where everything's planned.
Yeah.
You live here.
And I don't think it's to the fault of Batavia specifically, but I think that it is real. It just like sucks, like I see all the people of color like living in the low income apartments and the low income housing in our town, and I see all the white people living in these wealthy, affluent areas of our town, and it's like just the disconnect is.
Yeah, I guess that's why we call it systemic, right? It's not like one mayor in one specific year went, hey, let's do this. No. But I mean, over time, the decision of several mayors, several council people, and banking and business planning.
Yeah, a
It's such a
lot. Yeah.
massive thing. But
Hmm.
one thing at a time. And I know we went way out there, which is good to touch upon. But bring it back again. Keep bringing it back. I think it's the philosophy major in you, and I have a few philosophy friends, so we get into some conversations. So it's coming out there.
Yeah.
But I guess bring it back to I guess the riots and looting, which I mean you were talking about your experience with tear gas and whatnot in Aurora.
Hmm.
But what are your thoughts on the highly publicized riots and looting that took place in the western suburbs these past 3 weeks in Aurora on Monday, June 1st in Naperville that evening with the big firecracker and whatnot. But just what are your overall thoughts on that? I know you mentioned earlier with the voice of the people from Martin Luther King.
Hmm. Well, I mean, I'm not gonna. From what I've seen, mainly in our suburbs, it's a lot of white people doing all this destruction. Like I know, I saw in Naperville, like it was white people looting the stores. Like it's a lot of white people participating in these, especially all over the place. Like I don't know if this has been confirmed, but I saw that the Wendy's that got lit on fire in Atlanta that fire was started by a white woman. Just a ton of, like, when I was in Aurora, I saw a white girl. She walked on top of a cop car and started like jumping on it, and everybody was like, "Yo, like get down." But if
Wow.
to the credit of Black Lives Matter and this whole
Uh,
movement, like I'm not going to tell them how to protest their own injustice. You know, if they were the ones, if they're the ones going out and they're rioting and they're looting, I mean, yeah, like it sucks that it happens to small businesses, but I'm not gonna, like, I feel like I don't have a platform as a white person to tell them to stop and be like, hey, like that's not the way to do it. Don't do that. Because who am I to tell people of color how they should protest their own injustice that's being caused by white people? And then white people are going to tell them not to protest the way that they're protesting. I don't know. I just think it's kind of backwards. And I think that in the words of Martin Luther King again,
good guy to go
his
to.
son his son tweeted something and he said, in the words of my father, riots are the language of the unheard. So I think when these riots do happen and the looting does happen, it's not because it's fun, and it's not because they're like, oh yeah, like let's just destroy stuff because that'll be so fun. I think it's years and years and years of just oppression piling up and piling up and piling up. And eventually, as we all know, when one thing happens, it's like George Floyd was just the straw that broke the camel's back, and they just are so angry and feel so unheard that maybe this is their way of saying, hey, like we want to be heard. We're not being heard, and we're sick of this, you know? um I mean, I'm not gonna condone the violence. I'm not gonna say that it's the right thing to do, but I'm also not gonna be like, I'm not gonna be the one to say, hey, don't do that,
Yeah.
because I don't think that's my place.
Yeah, it's particularly tricky because everyone has their time and their place. I believe that everyone has their time and place to do what they need to do, and it's not all the time. Everyone, it's not for everyone for all. Every single moment and every time. Which
Yeah.
today's society with social media, you feel compelled. Everyone feels compelled to have a hot take. I mean, I'm doing this YouTube channel for crying out loud, right? So there you go. But everyone has a need to have their hot take. Comment on this specific moment. I guess
Yeah.
just kind of stopping to listen would just be
Mhm.
would just be really helpful.
Yeah.
For people.
I mean, plus, like, if we look back in history, there's been multiple times that white people have also rioted for, namely, dumb reasons, like their sports team lost or their sports team won.
Yeah.
But, or one very significant moment in American history, white people were so mad about being oppressed by the King of England that they started an entire war. It wasn't just rioting and looting, it was a whole war. So for us to say, hey, that's not a good idea. If you feel oppressed, don't riot and loot, because that's exactly what we did to literally found our nation. Like, we started a whole war, and I think America's lucky that Black people aren't at the point where they want to do that. I think that we're really lucky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with all the shit we did. I mean, how many people learned? I mean, including me, how many people learned about the Tulsa massacre from Watchmen? Didn't learn it, or, more and more stuff keeps popping up in history, or not popping up, but just reminded or even shared for the first time. Like what was it? The Kansas. I'm looking at my computer here. Was it Kansas? Like experiment or something, where they were like experimenting on Black people straight up.
Mm-hmm.
Like biologically. I'm like, what the hell, dude? And it's like the more and more you go about it, it's the deeper you go into the well, it's crazy. But here we are, in the year 2020. I'll touch on at least one more thing, unless you wanted to bring something up yourself. With coronavirus being very much a thing that will dominate our lives for probably the next year, even.
Probably.
What are your opinions on balancing this extremely interesting dynamic, where you want to show that solidarity with this national movement for this cause, and showing up in the streets, being heard, staying consistent with your message for everyone in the physical, real space. But at the same time, you also have a virus to think about staying 6 feet apart. One person could infect a lot of people, and they could bring it home with others. How do you reconcile that as someone who is organizing and leading and putting together these protests?
Well, when I'm at these protests, so many people bring masks, they bring hand sanitizer, they bring water, they bring all this stuff to make sure that people aren't infecting other people. Like, it's everybody wears their mask at a protest. Like, every single protest I've been to, every single person has had their mask on. And we try to maintain, even when we're marching, like, we try to maintain social distancing from other groups of people. And everybody, not only do they bring hand sanitizer to hand out, but everybody also has their own. And I think that I honestly, I think that's really cool, in that we're in the middle of a virus, yet we're still taking these precautionary measures to stay safe in order to protest injustice. And I also think that, coronavirus even goes into the injustice in the Black community. Like, there was a study that it was, like, obviously the population of Black people in America is 13%, but it was either 26% of death rates or 26% of infection rates. Black people had 26% of death or infection rates. I can't remember which one.
It hit Chicago particularly hard. The Black community in Chicago. Very much.
Yeah,
so.
It did. But I went to a protest in Chicago last Saturday, and there was a ton of people out there. There was, I could need 200,000 people at this one protest at Union Park, which I was late to, which sucked because I really wanted to be there. But I heard there was like 200,000 people there. Everybody was wearing masks. I saw all these pictures, aerial shots from the helicopters. People are social distancing. They're trying to stay safe. But I joined one later that was marching around the loop, and I was with my friend, and both of us had our masks on. We tried to social distance as best as we could.
Mm-hmm. Did you mean 20,000 people, by the way?
Yes.
Okay. I was just checking, because, like, wow, 200,000 people. Dang. All right.
Yeah.
But I mean, 20,000 people. Imagine a room of like 5,000 people. Multiply that by however many. That's still a lot of people. I'm not putting you down on that.
Yeah.
I was just double checking.
Fault. That's my fault. That's my fault. I'm sorry.
I can't judge distance, like, to save my life. So don't worry about it. I'm horrible with that stuff.
But yeah, I mean, from what I've seen in like studies and stuff, a lot of the coronavirus cases that are like the infection rates that are going up right now aren't from the protests. And they're from states trying to reopen
Yeah.
and not doing it correctly.
From what I've
obviously.
read, yeah, because of the time it takes for the symptoms to show, therefore someone gets
Yeah.
tested, and you can confirm it and mark it down as a tally. We're still kind of I think we're leaving this now, or we've entered the next stage, but a lot of the rising in the past 2 weeks was from the previous 2 weeks during those other protests, where people were protesting not getting their haircuts. And haircuts and restaurants and whatnot. So that was a whole thing. And so now we're at the opposite end of this, which the coronavirus is going to do its thing. A lot of states are reopening. Florida is in the midst of still reopening, despite them I think they're leading the country, or between them and Oregon, but either way,
Arizona is leading in. It's well, see, going back to your question about that guy who was complaining about the roads being shut down and such, like, I'm curious about what his opinion was about the coronavirus protests. And people taking to the streets and shutting down roads because they wanted to get haircuts and they wanted, for some reason, to go back to work. I don't want to go back. If I had a real job instead of DoorDash, I would be. Besides the no money part, that would suck. But like, not working would be kind of fun. But I don't know. I would be interested to hear his take on that protest and the roads being shut down because of those protests. Like, if you're mad about the Black Lives Matter protests, but you're not mad about the coronavirus protests, what's the difference? Like, why? Like, it just raises an eyebrow, I guess.
What is the best method in your opinion, I guess, and you're still finding this out, I'm sure, as well. What is the best method of getting a protest together on relatively short notice? Let's say maybe 5 days time. I don't know. But something new has happened, something that warrants, you believe, this kind of attention and this kind of action, and you only have a few days to put it together. How would you assemble such an event? And I promise I'm not an undercover cop. I totally dress like one, but I promise I'm not.
Okay, well, I'm glad you're not an undercover cop, because now I'm comfortable sharing my name. And yes, you can post this on YouTube now. But I think what I would do would be just like social media blast, like get the word out. We'll first start with a small core group of people to organize everything. If we want speakers, get speakers. But if we're just marching, organize a route in which we're going to go, set up a time, set up a place to meet, and then get the word out. Make a flyer, get the word out. So what I've been doing is I've been posting on my Instagram story. I've been sending it to my friends who typically like to protest or have been protesting with me. We have a Batavia Black Lives Matter page on Facebook where people post stuff in there. I put stuff on my Twitter. Pretty much just get the word out like that. And then it kind of moves like wildfire after that. Because I've seen countless flyers for protests, and the one in Naperville, I literally found it on social media. So that's been kind of my go-to for organizing purposes, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the go-to thing, which is Facebook and Twitter, which are the two big ones I hear about. And then if not those, then, or actually they'll usually start with some sort of organization like the NAACP chapter here in DuPage, because I know that's how another protester, India Smith Johnson, she was talking about how she's part of the either part of or works with the NAACP, which is a valuable resource. So usually like an official organization, like I don't know, Unity Partners, or I don't know if you've heard of them, or NAACP. And then, yes, the social media of Facebook and Twitter, which are just complete hot messes right now, and they have been for a while. But everyone's on them. It's just what we use as a country and as a world. But
Twitter's honest.
Yeah, go ahead.
Twitter's honestly been like a pretty reliable news source so far during these protests, in the sense that like that's where everybody, like, that's really where I've seen a lot of like the most real parts of these protests.
Yeah,
like
for
I've
sure.
seen a lot of stuff like when I'm at these protests, but you know, you watch like the TV news, like you watch CNN, Fox, MSNBC, like they don't really show
Yes.
the real side of the protests, and like the things that the police are doing to these protesters. Like the reason why, a huge reason why George Floyd's death was so prominent was because it exploded on social media. Like that's been a key outlet to seeing like all these different things. And just, I think it was a young couple. I don't know if they were a couple, but it was a black kid and a black girl. Probably like 17, 18, maybe early 20s. That was the video where the cops like literally just ambushed the car, ripped the girl out of the car, tased the guy. I think he had like a seizure because he had epilepsy or something. And now they're all over the news, like getting interviewed by everyone. But like that's where all the stuff starts, is usually on Twitter, and then it just spreads like wildfire.
Yeah, I don't know if you've been watching them, but there's a channel on Twitch, the streaming service, and I think they have their own website now. It's Woke, I
haven't seen that.
Yeah, it's an aggregate. This person, I don't even know who it is. They assemble on their stream all these feeds from various other protests that have been going on, as well as with local news. And watching the one in Atlanta, Georgia, that happened this past weekend, around that Wendy's where I forgot his name because there's just too many names, but I think Brooks. In the wake of those protests, just watching the local, like just a dude on Facebook who was just live streaming from his phone, and other people doing that, and just watching it side by side with like the actual local news, like a Fox affiliate or what have you, is astounding, because watching the mainstream sources focus so much on like the fire at the Wendy's, as opposed to the person on Facebook. I think Stormy Henderson was the name. He was like up in, the line, like, inches apart between the protesters and the police line, and just hearing like the outpouring of a mother, not related to the victim, but just a mother, a black mother,
and make them change. That's all we want them to do, is to change. Stop killing us for no reason. We deserve better than this. We should not have to fear if we gonna die if y'all pull up. Y'all are supposed to be here to protect us. I shouldn't have to fear for my life looking at you. Looking at y'all, I feel like I'm halfway in the grave. Halfway in the grave in front of y'all. I shouldn't have to feel like that. And you shouldn't have to feel like you have to feel because you got a job. Your job shouldn't make you feel like that. You shouldn't have to regret how you feel because you want to feed your family. You shouldn't have to regret going to work, but you have to, because you got to feed your family too. You got to feed your family too. So I understand that. I understand. I don't want you to lose your job. I don't want to take money from you off of your. I don't want to take money from you. But what I want you to do is encourage them. Encourage them to do right. Tell somebody else.
Hearing, from.
I think I saw that. Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
Even if you don't see it on that specific stream or that aggregate stream, you'll see it on social media, as you were saying.
Yeah.
And it's just so amazing, the dichotomy. Now, I should also say, at the same time, we're not like, anti-truth, where it's like all news is automatically false and it's all a Democratic hoax.
Yeah.
We're not like that, but at least I hope not. But I know I'm not. No. But there is still an inherent, like, deep problem with mainstream journalism in America.
Yeah.
from all of them, from, you know, not just Fox, which is like a, you know, its own level, but certainly from but from, you know, MSNBC, CNN, and even the newspapers, which my beloved Washington Post and New York Times, you know, sometimes I look at them like, man, come on, what are you doing? How is,
like, you got to be better than this?
Yeah,
man.
you really do. You really, I really want to expect better, but like, in seeing someone from Facebook, which again, shout out to them. I think yeah, Stormy Henderson is the name. Shout out to that guy and just his incredible work being there, and his, you know, his time and place in Atlanta that night was just amazing to watch. You know, watching that from my couch too, which is just weird to see. But yeah, this is where we are in 2020, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Like, one thing I wanted to bring up, but I forgot while you asked me about the riots and the looting and such, is like, why are we so focused on that? Like, what, like,
or the fires, the windows.
Like, yeah, I get it. Like, it's exciting. Like, it's exciting to see this Wendy's on fire on the news, and you're like, whoa, like, that's insane. But to focus just on that is taking the message away from the bigger picture, where they're just focusing on the fact that the Wendy's is on fire, but they don't ask the question about why the Wendy's is on fire. They just show it, and that's it. They're not like, oh, this Wendy's is on fire because XYZ, because people are angry about the injustice that's happening in America to Black people. They're mad about police brutality. They're mad about systemic racism. Like, they don't dive into that. They just show you just like the highlights of everything, like the exciting little parts that you can almost to spin it in a bad light. Like, we're so focused on Antifa and like all these other groups who are coming and rioting, but like, I mean, yeah, it's like good to pay attention to that, but at the same time, it shouldn't be the only focus of the media, you know? And
it may not even be like a very explicit thing, like, hey, riot happened, riot bad, but just how you cover it. I remember learning about this stuff like 5 years ago. It's like, Jesus Christ, this is how I've been digesting all this whole time. And yeah, just how everything is, just the style of how long a news clip is edited or cut down to, or the angle or the lighting. You know, how sometimes Black people are portrayed dark, you know, literally darker in lighting or what have you, and it can make them look more imposing. You know, and it may not even be an implicit thing where an editor is literally on Photoshop making something darker. Although I think that actually did happen with like O.J. Simpson, but it could just be something that accidentally happens. Yeah.
I guess one other thing, just to like end it. One other thing I just wanted to say was like that this, I want to say why this is important to me and why it should be important to other people too. But for me, why I'm so like gung ho about all this, and I guess why, to answer your question earlier, why I'm still like have excitement about this and why I'm not burnt out is because like I'm gay, and as a gay white woman in America, I have the privilege of being in the closet. Like I'm not anymore, but I have the privilege of, if I think I'm in a situation where someone might be homophobic, I can choose not to disclose that. Like, I can choose not to tell them that and just act straight. Whereas Black people can't not tell someone that they're Black because it's literally on their skin, you know? And I just almost felt like this, like, calling, like I have to be out there with them, because yes, I face oppression, but not nearly the same as the Black community at all. And the fact that I have the privilege to hide and so almost pick and choose when I want to disclose information about myself, like that's, it's just like, I just think about the fact, like, what if I had to wear like an "I'm gay" sticker on my head?
Yeah.
You know, like that would suck. And I would hate to do that. And I would hate to be discriminated against because of that. And it just, like, the fact that Black people literally don't have a choice just sucks, you know? And like, I just feel like, especially being white, that I have to use like my white privilege in order to uplift the voices of Black people and let their stories of injustice be heard, because it's important and it's been happening for so long that white people are almost immune to it at this point. We are immune. We've always been immune to it, but like literally blind to it. Whereas I have conversations with my friends, my white friends, and they're like, I don't know, like, I don't really think that stuff happens anymore. Or like racism isn't really that big of a deal anymore. Or we're watching a movie and it's like placed in like the 60s where like racism is happening. And they're like, oh, I'm so glad things aren't like that anymore. But things are, you know? So I guess that's why I am so amped up about this and so involved, I guess.
Well said. I got nothing. I got nothing. Nothing to say to that other than seriously, thank you so much for your time and sharing your story. And I hope people listen. People listen.
Yeah,
I think
I mean,
listening's been the top of my agenda. So yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I really hope people start, at the very least, like just get educated, you know, because it's just, it needs to stop. And the first step is acknowledging that it happens, but the second step is getting educated about it, you know?
Yeah. All right.
So
Jenny Scara, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.